When the dynasty changed and news came that my husband, he Yanting, had died in battle, I was holding the medical book that had just confirmed my pregnancy. Me mother-in-law snatched the medical book and tore it to shreds. "You've already jinxed my son to death, and now you want this bastard child to split the family fortune." The whole family was exiled 3,000 li, and I, while pregnant, had to take care of my delicate sister-in-law and my frail parents-in-law. On the night my baby was stillborn, I overheard the escorting bailiffs chatting and laughing drunkenly. "General, he dead in battle. That was a ruse to escape, using 3 cities and our path of exile in exchange for his own meteoric rise." The eunuch sneered as he tightened the white silk cord around my neck. "On the joyous wedding day of Lord He and Miss Ava, it is time for you, his former wife, to be on your way." When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day I received the news of his death, and my mother-in-law was wailing. The He family line cannot end. This time, I swallowed the feigned death potion directly. "Your daughter-in-law wishes to follow her husband to the afterlife." Just a moment ago, I was still immersed in the daze and slight joy of having just confirmed my pregnancy, but suddenly, earth-shattering wails came from outside the door. "Oh, my son." The news that he Yanting, my husband in name only, who was stationed at the border year-round, had died in battle, crashed into the He residence, accompanied by the cries of my mother-in-law, Madame Zhang, and my sister-in-law, He Mingju. Before the medical book in my hand could even warm up, Madame Zhang, who had heard the news, rushed in and snatched it away. "What is this, huh?" Her triangular eyes sharply scanned the words on the medical book, the sorrow on her face instantly replaced by a twisted rage. "You are actually pregnant." "Mother." I subconsciously moved to protect my lower abdomen. "Shut up." Jiangxi's saliva almost sprayed onto my face. "You jinx. You husband killer. Ever since you entered our He family's door, nothing has gone right for Yanting. Now, you've gone and jinxed him to death." "That is not it, Mother. The border war is dangerous." "You dare talk back." He Mingju took a step forward and pushed me hard, with teardrops on her face. But her eyes were full of viciousness. "My brother was jinxed to death by you. Who knows whose bastard you are carrying in your belly, trying to use this bastard spawn to get a share of our He family's property. Dream on." I staggered and grabbed the corner of the table to steady myself. My heart was as cold as ice in the 12th lunar month. This scene before my eyes, how familiar it was. It is just that, in my past life, I was truly panicked, grief-stricken, and helpless. I cried and tried to explain, knelt down and begged them to believe me, to protect He Yanting's only flesh and blood. What I got in return was even more vicious curses. The escalating torture on the road to exile that followed. The boundless despair of the night my child was stillborn, and the heart-piercing, bone-chilling truth I only learned right before I died, General. He died in battle. No way. That was him faking his death, trading 3 cities and our exile for his own smooth sailing to the top. On Lord He and Miss Ava's joyous wedding day, you, the ex-wife, should be on your way. The suffocating feeling of the white silk tightening around my neck. It feels like it is still there. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at this fate-deciding moment. The heavens have given me a chance to do it all over again. This time, I am no longer that Chao Yangxin who was at everyone's mercy, who poured her heart out only to die a horrible death. Mrs. Zhang was still wailing and crying, beating her chest and stamping her feet. "Oh, my poor son, now that you are gone, how am I supposed to live? What sins did our He family commit to marry such a jinx?" He Mingju supported her mother and glared at me fiercely. "What are you crying for? You are the one who killed my brother. You'll owe our He family for the rest of your life." I lowered my eyes, looking at the torn pieces of paper on the floor with joyful pulse and slippery pulse written on them. My heart turning to ice. Family fortune. If your He family hadn't coveted my Chao family's huge dowry to cover your debts back then, would you have married a merchant's daughter like me? Now that you are done using me, You despise the reek of money on me, despise my low birth, and think I am not good enough for your noble family. He Yanting never even gave me a proper look. Shortly after our wedding, he went off to the borderlands, leaving me in this mansion to serve your family of wolves. No heir. I gently stroked my still flat belly. This child. In my past life, I fought with my life to save him. But what happened? On the road to exile, I dragged my heavy body, saved my rations to feed the delicate and picky. He Mingju gave my only tattered cotton-padded jacket to my mother-in-law, who was pretending to be sick, and finally collapsed from exhaustion in the icy, snowy land. When I woke up, the child was already gone. Bear an heir for your he family, as if you are worthy. Madame Zhang wailed for a long time, seeing that I wasn't crying and begging like in my past life. She seemed to feel that something was off, or perhaps that her act wasn't convincing enough. She abruptly stopped crying, slapped her thighs, and adopted a tone that seemed righteous and noble, but was in fact heart-piercing with every word. Our he family can't be without an heir. She stared intently at my belly, her eyes filled with undisguised suspicion and disgust. Who knows if this is even our he family's seed? Even if it is, being born without a father, it would just be a burden in our he family's current situation. How could we possibly afford to raise a child of unknown origins? Here it comes. The exact same lines as in my past life. It is just that in my past life, when she said these words, I was still desperately pleading. This time, I didn't wait for her to continue her performance. Under the astonished gazes of the mother and daughter, I slowly raised my hand and put the brown pill that I had been hiding in my sleeve into my mouth. The movement was so fast there was almost no hesitation. The pill slid down my throat, carrying a bitter taste. I raised my eyes to look at Madame Zhang. My breath was as faint as a thread, but my voice was clear enough for them to hear every single word. Mother is right. I clutched my stomach, forcing a pained yet submissive expression onto my face. It is this daughter-in-law who is useless, for not being able to give my husband a son or daughter, and for angering mother and little sister. My body swayed, and as if I couldn't support myself, I collapsed weakly onto the floor. This daughter-in-law is willing to follow my husband in death to preserve the he family's honor. The drug's effect was extremely fast. A burning sensation accompanied by excruciating pain rose from my abdomen, quickly spreading throughout my entire body. My consciousness began to fade, and my vision grew blurry. But in the instant, before I completely lost consciousness, I clearly saw on Madame Zhang's harsh face. Rage and astonishment were intertwined, finally settling into a hint of relief, as if a great burden had been lifted. Mingzu even more dramatically covered her mouth, but a flash of glee and the smugness of finally got rid of this trouble flickered in her eyes. They exchanged a look, and with a tacit understanding, neither cried out nor called for a doctor. Just like that, they coldly watched me breathe my last. The sound of Madame Zhang's commanding voice pitched high. Quick, get this unlucky thing out of here. Don't dirty the grounds of my he family. The effect of the feigned death drug was very peculiar. It made my body cold and stiff as if I were truly dead, with no breath or heartbeat. But my consciousness retained a sliver of clarity, like a ghost trapped in a shell, vaguely perceiving everything around me. I could feel someone roughly lifting me, throwing me into a thin, musty coffin. Bang. The coffin lid closed, shutting out the last sliver of light. It also blocked out Madame Zhang's undisguised, gleeful command. Find a mass grave, just dig a hole and bury her, so she is not an eyesore. A mass grave. In my past life, they at least gave me a straw mat to wrap my body in and buried me on a barren mountain outside the city. In this life, they can't even be bothered to make this superficial effort good. This way, it is more convenient for me to act. The coffin was bumpily carried out of the he residence. I heard the chatter of the passers-by. Oh my, isn't that the young mistress of the he family? How is she just gone like that? I heard she died for love, holding the news of General He's death. She followed him right away. For real, that intense. Intense. My foot, haven't you heard? Madame, he said, she jinxed her own son to death. She was too ashamed to live. Ex-Kesque, a merchant's daughter, just not fit for high society. It is better that she is dead. A hero like General. She was never worthy of him in the first place. Mockery, questioning, and a touch of the cold indifference of a spectator. These voices were exactly the same as the ones I heard after I died in my past life. It is just that in my past life, my soul was trapped, and listening to this gossip, I only felt a heart full of grievance and helplessness. Now, I am completely calm inside, and I even feel a little like laughing. Go ahead and talk as much as you want. Soon, you'll find out who the real joke is. The coffin was thrown into the pit, and dirt fell with a sheesh sound onto the coffin lid. The sound was muffled and oppressive. When the last trace of sound was cut off, the world fell into complete darkness and silence. I silently calculated the time in my mind. About the time it takes for an incense stick to burn had passed. Creak, the coffin lid was carefully pried open a crack. Fresh, cold air rushed in, dispersing the stuffiness of the tomb. Miss, a low, familiar voice, choked with sobs, sounded out. It is Zhongbo, the old servant from my maiden family. In my past life, after I was exiled, he tried every possible way to pull strings to save me, but the He family sent people to break one of his legs, and he eventually died filled with resentment. After my rebirth, the first thing I did was contact him through a secret method that only we knew. Zhongbo, I am all right, I said with a hoarse voice. In the moonlight, I saw the genuine worry and tear stains on his old face, and my heart warmed. The drug's effects are wearing off. We have to go quickly. Zhongbo firmly helped me out. His movements gentle yet swift. I lay on the cold, damp earth, looking at the sparse stars scattered across the sky, and took a deep breath. I am free. I've completely escaped from that man-eating den of demons. The He family. Miss, what do we do next? Zhongbo asked, vigilantly, looking around the desolate mass grave. As for the He family, let them be smug for now. I propped myself up with my arms. After the effects of the drug wore off, my body was still a bit weak, but my gaze was as sharp as a knife. Zhongbo, 2 things. Go do them immediately. Your orders, miss. First, secretly spread the news of how the He family drove their pregnant daughter-in-law to her death, and that the suicide pact was just a lie they made up to cover up the fact that they drove me to death, afraid I would divide the family fortune. No need to make a big fuss, just start with the gossip in the streets and alleys, the idle chatter after meals. The blade of public opinion is sometimes more lethal than real weapons. First, I will ruin the He family's reputation as a gate of loyalty and valor. This old servant understands. Resentment flashed in Zhongbo's eyes. For the He family to treat you this way, miss, is an offense against heaven. Second, I paused, my voice growing colder. The land deeds in my dowry can't be touched openly, but there are a few hidden properties and a batch of private jewelry my mother left me. You immediately find a way to sell them all off secretly for cash. Remember, it must be done secretly, and absolutely no one can trace it back to us. Money is the foundation of my revenge. In my previous life, I was drained of everything by them. In this life, I will hold firmly onto my own capital. Yes, rest assured, miss. This old servant will get it done, even if it costs me my life. Uncle Zhong nodded firmly. Supporting me, he trudged unsteadily away from this mass grave where countless wronged souls were buried. We headed towards a secluded small courtyard that I had arranged in advance in the city. There, that will be the first base for my revenge. 3 days later, I sat by the window of the small courtyard, listening to the news Uncle Zhong had returned with. Miss, the news has been spread. Right now, there are many people outside discussing the matter of the He family, driving their daughter-in-law to her death. Although it hasn't caused a big stir yet, the seeds have been sown. I gently blew the foam off my tea. What is the reaction from the He family, Lady Jiang, and He Mingzhu have shut themselves in? Old Master He is said to be even more ill. Uncle Zhang's tone held a hint of glee. Also, the He family is busy making a big show of organizing. Your funeral. My funeral, I raised an eyebrow. What title did they give me? They're saying in memory of your deep love and devotion for the young master. They're giving you a grand burial with the rights of a legal wife. Uncle Zhang's tone was sarcastic. Inside the coffin is a wooden doll dressed in your old clothes. The mourning hall is set up in the side courtyard of the He residence, with all the ceremonial music. It is quite lively. A grand burial with the rights of a legal wife. I almost laughed out loud. Is Madame Zhang trying to both preserve the He family's reputation for being benevolent and righteous, and also can't wait to send me, this unlucky dead person, out of the estate? Such a hypocrite. Miss, should we go? Uncle Zhang made a gesture. Number, I refused flatly. It is not the time yet. What would I go there for? To watch them put on a show, or to accept those insincere condolences? Disgusting. Let them have their show. I put down my teacup, my eyes cold. The higher they build the stage, the more tragic the fall will be. Another 2 days passed. At night, I changed into an inconspicuous night traveling outfit, and under Uncle Zhang's cover, silently arrived near the mourning hall in the side courtyard of the He estate. I wanted to hear with my own ears just how splendidly this show was being performed. Inside the mourning hall, white banners fluttered and candle flames flickered. A heavy, newly lacquered coffin was placed in the center. Madame Zhang was wearing a set of plain clothes, sitting to one side, holding a handkerchief but shedding few tears. He Mingzhu was even more absent-minded, her eyes glancing outside from time to time. A few distant relatives of the He family were keeping company on the side, offering some perfunctory words of comfort. Yanting's wife was a good woman, just ill-fated. Indeed, who could have expected? Sigh, our condolences. Just then, a man who looked like a trusted steward walked hurriedly to Madame Zhang's side and whispered a few words in her ear. Zhang Xi's expression changed abruptly. First it was shock, then a trace of wild joy actually flashed in the depths of her eyes, but she quickly covered it up with sorrow. She waved her hand, telling the steward to withdraw, then forced a smile at the few relatives in the mourning hall. Uncles, you've had a long day. It is late now. Please go and rest. Mingzhu and I will be fine keeping watch here. Those few couldn't wait to leave this inauspicious place, so after a couple of token refusals, they took their leave one after another. When only the mother and daughter, Jiang Shi and He Mingzhu, were left in the mourning hall, Mrs. Zhang suddenly grabbed He Mingzhu's hand, her fingers trembling slightly from excitement. Mingzhu, your brother might not be dead. What? He Mingzhu exclaimed in shock, and quickly covered her mouth, her eyes wide and round. Mom, are you serious? The butler just now, it is a secret letter from the border. Zhang lowered her voice, but she couldn't hide her excitement. It says the plan is going smoothly. Tell your brother to stay steady. The family has to stay steady too, especially keep that sister-in-law of yours under control. Don't let her go out and about and ruin the big plan. Keep me under control. Don't let me go out and about. I was hiding in the dark, and my heart suddenly clenched. Here it comes. The same words as in my past life. The so-called keeping me steady is to trap me in the He family's backyard to rot, cutting me off from any outside news to make it easier for them to manipulate me. The so-called don't go out and walk around was just because they were afraid I would discover their unspeakable secret. He Yanting, so you are not dead after all. So you really did use a fake death to plot something. There wasn't the slightest trace of grief on Mrs. Zhang's face. Only calculation and relief. This is great now. That eyesore, Mrs. Chow, died on her own. It is the safest this way. Saves us the trouble of having to watch her. He Mingzhu also realized and beamed with joy. That is great. Brother isn't dead. Doesn't that mean our he family will? Mother brother is coming back after rendering a great service. Are we going to hit the big time? Shh, keep your voice down. Mrs. Zhang shot her a reproachful glare, but she couldn't hide the smile on her face. This matter isn't settled yet. We absolutely cannot let this get out. Especially, no one can know how Mrs. Chow died. What is there to be afraid of? He Mingzhu said dismissively. The daughter of a mere merchant. If she is dead, she is dead. When brother comes back, who would dare to investigate? The mother and daughter looked at each other and smiled. And that smile, under the pale candlelight of the morning hall, looked particularly horrifying. It was as if the one lying in that coffin wasn't their daughter-in-law and sister-in-law, but just an obstacle that had finally been removed. I clenched my fists tightly, my nails digging deep into my palms. Hatred, like a poisonous vine, grew wildly. So, after I died, this is what they were really like. So my death, to them, was actually something so worthy of celebration. Yanting, Mrs. Zhang, Mingzhu, you just wait. However happily you laugh now, is how miserably I will make you cry in the future. I left the he residence without a sound, returning to the small courtyard. Zhang Bo came up to me, his expression grave. Miss, are you all right? I shook my head, took a deep breath, and suppressed the churning rage within me. Zhang Bo, how is the selling of the properties going? Fairly smoothly. We've already gotten some cash. It is just, miss, what do we need so much money for? It has its use. I didn't explain in detail, continue to spread the news, and at the same time, find a way to contact a few generals who hold old grudges against He Yanting in the army, or people from the censorate. Be careful. Don't expose ourselves. He Yanting colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country. With my strength alone, it is very hard to get ironclad evidence. I must borrow the strength of those who also want to bring him down. Yes, although Zhang Bo was confused, he trusted me unconditionally. Just then, from far outside the courtyard, suddenly came the sound of urgent hoofbeats like a shower of rain. Accompanied by hoarse shouts, it approached from the distance, tearing through the silent night sky like a clap of thunder. 800 Lai Express from the border pass. There is news about General He, a great victory. General He isn't dead. General He has achieved a peerless, miraculous feat, enthroned the new emperor, and will be returning in triumph soon. Duke of Zhengguo, His Majesty has made General He the Duke of Zhengguo. The world outside exploded. The cheers, the sound of firecrackers, the buzz of discussion were like boiling water, almost enough to overturn the sky of the entire capital. Duke of Zhengguo. General He isn't dead. He even became the Duke of Zhengguo. Heaven bless our dynasty. General He is truly a god of war descended to earth. I stood by the well in the small courtyard, drew up a bucket of icy well water, and slowly washed my hands. The water was very cold, stinging my skin until it ached slightly. Just like the name He Yanting. Hearing it again could still evoke the bone-chilling cold of my past life. Uncle Zhang hurried back from outside, with unconcealable shock and anger on his face. Miss, the news is confirmed. He Yanting. That animal, not only is he not dead, but he installed a new emperor on the border, suppressed the rebellion, and was specially decreed by the new emperor as the hereditary Duke of Zhengguo. He picked up a cloth towel and meticulously dried the water from my hands. My movements were neither hurried nor slow. What else? I asked. Uncle Zhang caught his breath and said indignantly, Everyone outside is saying that he is accompanied by a girl surnamed Lin, the granddaughter of the late Grand Tutor Lin, named Lin Chushuang. It is said this Miss Ava saved him when He Yanting was in peril. And the two have been inseparable on the border ever since. Lin Chushuang. This name was like a poison-laced needle, stabbing viciously into my heart. In my past life, it was her who, before I was strangled to death with a white silk sash, stood beside He Yanting in a bright red wedding dress, looking at me with a victor's pitying gaze. It was her. She took my place, enjoying everything that was supposed to be mine. Turns out, they had hooked up this early on. What life-saving grace, it is just an excuse for their collusion. What about the He family? My voice was perfectly calm. Uncle Jong spat. PFF'd. That black-hearted family. They were pretending to hold a funeral before. But as soon as the urgent news arrived, Madame Zhang fainted on the spot from happiness. After she woke up, she immediately ordered people to dismantle the mourning hall, take down the white banners, and replace them with red silk lanterns. Now the entire He mansion is decorated with lanterns and streamers, even more festive than the New Year. What about my coffin? I asked lightly. I heard they threw it into the mass grave overnight, without even taking out the puppets inside. Zhongbo's eyes turned red. Miss, they're completely disregarding you. I smiled, as expected. In my past life, I died by committing suicide for love, and they could still hypocritically set up a memorial tablet for me to earn a good reputation. In this life, I died under unclear circumstances, and He Yanting has returned in glory. So of course they're desperate to erase all traces of my existence, as if I had never existed. This way, it is easier to make room for that benefactor. Miss Ava. Let's go, Zhongbo. Let's go out and have a look. I changed into a set of the most ordinary coarse cloth clothes, using a headscarf to cover most of my face. Let's see this grand spectacle of a city-wide celebration, on the street. It was a sea of people. Almost all the citizens had poured onto the streets, and every face was brimming with the excitement of sharing in the glory. Restaurants and tea houses hung up celebratory banners, and even the street vendors' calls sounded cheerful. Have you heard? Not only is the Duke of Zhongguo not dead, he even performed the monumental service of saving the emperor. I knew it. General, he is a star from the heavens descended to earth. How could he die so easily? I hear that Miss Ava is also a heroine among women. She and the Duke of Zhongguo are truly a match made in heaven. Isn't that the truth? Much better than that. The previous one from a merchant family. Shh, don't mention that, Jinx. It is good that she is dead. So she won't be an eyesore to His Grace the Duke. The sound of chatter, like a tide, kept flooding into my ears. Almost everyone was singing the praises of He Yanting's achievements, and praising the beautiful story between him and Lin Qushuang. And I, the ex-wife, became that thoughtless, an eyesore in death, jinxed existence. Occasionally there were a few dissenting voices, but they were also quickly drowned out. Didn't they say, the young mistress of the He family died for love? What died for love? I'd say she just wasn't blessed. She couldn't enjoy the good fortune of being the Duchess. Exactly, the He family did everything they could. They even held a funeral for her. Benevolent and righteous to the end, I scoffed inwardly. Uncle Zhong, beside me, was trembling with rage. He tried to speak up and argue several times, but I stopped him with a look. It is not time yet. We followed the flow of people and slowly walked to the street where the He mansion was. It was even more impenetrably crowded here. The main gates of the He mansion were wide open. Red silk was hung high, and the ground was covered in firecracker debris. Madame Zhang and He Mingju were wearing brand new clothes of excellent quality, standing at the entrance with looks of irrepressible smugness and glory on their faces. A constant stream of officials and wealthy gentlemen came to offer congratulations, and gifts were piled high in the gatehouse. Madame Zhang straightened her back, accepting everyone's flattery. Madame He, your bitter days are over at last. Congratulations, congratulations. The old madam will be the Duchess Dowager from now on, with endless fortune to enjoy. Miss Mingzhu has also grown more and more beautiful. Her future is boundless. He Mingzhu held her chin high, like a peacock spreading its tail, enjoying everyone's attention. Just then, someone cautiously brought up, "Old Madame, I heard about the previous young madame of your estate." Madame Zhang's expression instantly sank. She took out a handkerchief and feigned wiping away non-existent tears. Sigh, don't mention that unfortunate child. Her voice carried a deliberately crafted sadness. Perhaps when Yanting had his accident, she was too heartbroken, and unexpectedly, just followed him. Our He family, considering her deep devotion, gave her a proper wife's funeral. Who knew, Sigh? Perhaps it was her fate, unable to enjoy this good fortune that followed. With these words, she both highlighted the He family's benevolence and righteousness, and attributed the reason for my death by illness to my own lack of fortune, and it being my fate, perfectly shirking all suspicion of having forced me to my death. He Mingzhu chimed in from the side, her tone filled with undisguised contempt. Mother, don't be sad anymore. Big Brother has now returned safely and even achieved great merits. This is a huge, joyous occasion. Some people, just don't have the fate for it. You can't force it. The people around immediately chimed in. Yes, yes, old madam, our condolences. His Grace the Duke's fortune is as vast as the heavens. That one just wasn't blessed enough. Things are better now. I heard His Grace the Duke has a female confidante, and she is the Grand Tutor's daughter. Now that is a good match. A smile returned to Matriarch Zhang's face, with a hint of showing off. That child, Chu Shuang, is indeed a good one. She is well-read and sensible, and has also done a great service for Yanting. Our He family will not treat her poorly. Her tone was intimate, as if Lin Shuang was already her daughter-in-law. I watched the mother-daughter duo acting in concert, twisting black and white, and my heart turned icy cold. What a won't treat you unfairly. What a good match back to the small courtyard. Zhongbo was still fuming. Miss, they're simply inhuman. They sure didn't have this ugly look on their faces when they were using your dowry. I sat by the window, listening to the faint commotion still coming from outside. Let them be smug, I said calmly. Zhongbo, the news we spread before. We can't stop. We need to add more fuel to the fire. What do you mean, miss? How the He family drove their pregnant daughter-in-law to her death. How they eagerly dismantled the mourning hall to celebrate, and those no-good fortune remarks from Madame Zhang, and He Mingzhu just now, spread all of it out for me, carefully and quietly. Emphasized that when I died, I was still clutching the torn-up medical book on pregnancy pulses in my arms. I want everyone to know that my death was definitely not that simple. I didn't die of illness, and I certainly wasn't unfortunate. I was forced to my death. By them, the He family, forced to my death while I was still alive. Yais, this old servant will go do it right away. A fighting spirit ignited in Zhongbo's eyes. Also, I stopped him. The money we have on hand, take out most of it. Find a way to bribe a few servants in the He residence who are out of favor, or people who used to be by He Yanting's side and were later marginalized. I need to know what on earth He Yanting did at the border. I must find evidence of him colluding with the enemy and betraying the country. Even if it is just a small clue. This, I am afraid, it won't be easy. Zhongbo looked troubled. He Yanting is riding high right now. The threshold of the He residence is about to be trampled flat, and even the servants are stuck up. With a great reward, there will always be brave men. My gaze was sharp, and don't look for those who are in power. Just find those who have been wronged and hold a grudge. Remember, it is better to be slow than to be wrong. You absolutely must not alert the enemy. This old servant understands. Zhongbo accepted the order and left. I sat alone in the room, listening to the faint sound of string and wind instruments in the distance. That must be the He residents holding a celebratory banquet, celebrating their son's new life, celebrating their upcoming overwhelming wealth. And me, this dead person in their eyes, am in the darkness, weaving a web of revenge bit by bit. A few days later, public opinion began to subtly change. Although the mainstream was still praising He Yanting, discussions about the He family driving their daughter-in-law to her death began to circulate quietly among the public. Have you heard? That young madam of the He family was still pregnant when she died. Really, wasn't it? Said that she died of illness? Died of illness? Yeah, right. My second granduncle's third niece is a maid at the He residence. And get this. I heard it was Madame He who tore up the medical book that diagnosed the pregnancy pulse. She was literally angered to death. That is too cruel, isn't it? Just because her son died, she doesn't even want her grandchild. Who knows? And haven't you guys noticed? It has only been a few days since the news of General He's death, and the young madam is gone. The moment the news of General He's resurrection came, the morning hall was dismantled faster than anyone else. Tatsuke TSK. The more you think about it, the scarier it gets. This gossip, like tiny sparks, scattered across every corner of the capital city. For the time being, it couldn't shake He Yanting's sky-high reputation, but it was enough to make some people suspicious. It caused a faint, unnoticeable crack to appear on the He family's facade of loyalty, valor, benevolence, and righteousness. At the same time, news also came from Zhongbo. Miss, we bribed a servant woman who does rough chores in Madam He's courtyard, and also an old servant who used to wait outside Yanting's study and was sent away to the estate for stumbling upon something. Oh, I perked up. What did you find out? That old woman said that after Madame Zhang dismantled the morning hall, she was so happy in her own room that she kept chanting Buddha's name, and also said that eyesore is finally gone. Once Chu Shuang marries in, she can give me a big fat grandson. I sneered. What about the old servant? He was the key. Zhang Bo lowered his voice. The old servant said he wasn't sure, but one time, he thought he heard He Yanting secretly talking in the study with a man with a high-pitched voice, mentioning something like 3 cities. Agreement, guarantee he didn't hear clearly at the time, and was later sent away on some pretext. 3 cities. Agreement. My heart suddenly leaped, although the details were vague. This lines up with the truth I knew from my past life that he traded 3 cities for his future. This old servant, he is the key witness. Protect him well, I said immediately. Give him enough silver money, get him settled, but don't act rashly for now. There will be a use for him later. Yes, the clues finally started to emerge. After a few more days, a more definite piece of news arrived. He Yanting, bringing Lin Chushuang, has already arrived at the outskirts of the capital and can enter the city tomorrow. The new emperor will host a banquet in the palace to welcome them. Zhongbo was a bit anxious, miss. They'll be back soon. What is the panic? I interrupted him. The good show has just begun. I walked to the desk, spread out the paper, and picked up the brush. Zhongbo grind the ink. Miss, you are going to write a few stories. I dipped my brush full of ink, its tip landing on the snow-white Xuan paper. Some stories about heartless men, traitors, and venomous women. My brush began to move, the handwriting neat, yet carrying a chilling sharpness. The first story is called The Lord Duke's Resurrection Plan, A Beauty's Tears, a pile of white bones. I am going to thoroughly muddy the waters of this capital city. When He Yanting is at the peak of his glory, I will send him the first one. Generous gift. On the day He Yanting returned to the capital, the whole city turned out. The new emperor gave him the highest honor imaginable, a victory parade down the Imperial Avenue. I mixed in with the crowd, watching that man on the tall, fine horse, dressed in an imperially bestowed Qilin robe, his face cold and handsome. He nodded slightly, accepting the fervent cheers from the common people on both sides of the road. His gaze was sharp, carrying a kind of condescending indifference. He was like a completely different person from the cold, distant husband in my memory. No, perhaps this is his true self. A gorgeously decorated carriage followed closely by his side. A corner of the carriage curtain was lifted, revealing a beautiful and ethereal face with a touch of arrogance. Lin Chushuang. She wore a dress tailored from cloud brocade, with an imperially bestowed step-shake hairpin of a Luan bird, holding a pearl in her hair bun. A perfect smile played on her lips as she basked in the crowd's attention. What a perfect couple! Even louder cheers erupted from the crowd. Duke of Zhongguo, 1,000 years to the Duke of Zhongguo. Miss Ava? That must be the Miss Ava who saved the Duke, right? She is truly like a fairy. A match made in heaven. Now that is a match made in heaven. All the praise was for them. No one remembered. He Yanting's officially wedded wife, whose body was not yet cold. No, in everyone's hearts, that merchant's daughter, Chao Yanxin, should have made way for this perfect couple long ago. I pressed down my bamboo hat, turned, and left the clamoring crowd. Returning to the small courtyard, Uncle Zhong was waiting at the door, his face livid. Miss, they went outside the city. I stopped in my tracks. Where did they go? They went to your cenotaph. Uncle Zhong's voice trembled with anger. He Yanting took Lin Qushuang, and also Madame Zhang, and he Mingju. The whole family went. They said it was to pay respects. I almost laughed out loud. A weasel paying a New Year's visit to a chicken, it is up to no good. Let's go see, I said calmly. Let's see what kind of play they're trying to put on. On a barren mountain outside the city, in front of my humble cenotaph. Sure enough, a lot of people had gathered around. There were servants from the He family, but most were commoners who had rushed over upon hearing the news to watch the spectacle. He Yanting stood before the grave with his hands behind his back, dressed in the everyday attire of a duke, which accentuated his tall and straight posture. Lin Qushuang stood by his side, dressed in a simple white dress, yet it couldn't conceal her air of luxury and nobility. Madame Zhang and He Mingju stood a little further back, with no grief on their faces, but rather a sense of triumphant glee. Older sister, Lin Qushuang began, her voice gentle and soft, yet it carried clearly to everyone's ears. Your little sister has come to see you. She took 2 steps forward, looking at the weed-covered dirt mound and the crude wooden plaque, and sighed softly. Older sister, you left in such a hurry. Your little sister's heart is truly sad. She raised her hand and wiped the corner of her eye with a handkerchief. Such superb acting. Yanting told me everything, she continued, her voice carrying a perfectly timed sob. He said you have a fierce temperament, that upon hearing the news of his death, you actually followed him just like that. This younger sister is in awe of my elder sister's devotion to Yan Ting. I hid behind a tree in the distance, watching coldly, in awe. I bet she couldn't wait to clap and cheer. But her tone shifted, carrying a hint of barely perceptible superiority and pity. Sister, why must you be like this by leaving? You've saved your own reputation, but have you ever thought about how much pain Yan Ting is in, or about the He family's face? She turned slightly to the side, seemingly unintentionally, and gently caressed her still flat belly. The gesture was very subtle, but enough for the sharp-eyed to see. A low commotion immediately rippled through the crowd. Did you see? Miss Ava seems pregnant. Oh my God, so soon, no wonder. But young mistress, he just passed away. Lin Qushuang acted as if she didn't hear the gossip around her, or rather, that was exactly the effect she wanted. She looked at my tomb, her voice low, but like a venomous snake, it slithered into my ears, and into the ears of every eavesdropping bystander. Sister, the position you occupy, I will sit securely in it for you. I will take good care of Yanting, honor my parents-in-law, and get along with my sisters-in-law, and the child in my belly. She subconsciously protected her lower abdomen, her face showing a mother's gloating glow. He will inherit everything from the He family and become Yanting's rightful legitimate son. You just rest in peace. Every word, every sentence, was a gentle knife, with every cut aimed at the deceased's heart. She was telling me, and she was also telling everyone. I am dead, she is here. My position is hers now. Everything I have will belong to her son in the future. He Yanting didn't say a word from beginning to end, just stood there silently, as if tacitly approving everything Lin Qushuang said and did. Madame Zhang, however, couldn't hold back any longer. She took a step forward, raising her voice as if to make sure everyone could hear. Oh, Chu Shuang, why bother saying all this to an ill-fated person like her? Stop being sad and take care of yourself. You are carrying a child now, so you are precious. Our He family's legitimate grandson can't have even the slightest thing go wrong. She affectionately took Lin Chushuang's hand, her tone more loving and kind than ever before. That is right. He Mingzhu also chimed in, shooting a contemptuous glance at my grave. Big brother is a duke now. A mere merchant's daughter like her was never good enough for him. It is good that she is dead. Sister Chushuang is the one who is a match for our family's status. This position of duchess should have belonged to Sister Chushuang all along. As she spoke, she pulled something out from her robes and handed it to Lin Chushuang. Sister Chushuang, look, this is a set of ruby head ornaments I found from her. It looks quite valuable. For someone like her to wear this is a waste. You are beautiful and have such a good temperament. It'll only look good on you. It is yours. That set of head ornaments. It was what my mother spent a fortune on, commissioning the best artisan in the capital to craft for me when I came of age. One of my most cherished dowry items. In my past life, He Mingzhu had coveted it for a long time. I never thought that in this life she would actually dare to rummage it out of my relics and give it to my enemy, right in front of my grave. Lin Chushuang took the head ornaments, a flash of satisfaction in her eyes, but she feigned refusal. This isn't right, is it? After all, it is sister's relic. What is not right about it? Madame Zhang snatched the head ornaments and shoved them directly into Lin Chushuang's hands. Her things are the He family's things, aren't they? I am making the decision now. It is yours. You are the great benefactor of our He family now. Carrying my He family's legitimate grandson, why shouldn't you get the best of everything? In that case, I thank you, Mother, and thank you, Sister Mingzhu. Lin Chushuang accepted it reluctantly, the triumphant smirk on her lips almost impossible to hide. I watched them in front of my grave, dividing up my belongings and currying favor with the new mistress. The hatred in the depths of my heart was like a spreading wildfire. Good, very good. What you've taken now, in the future, I'll make you spit it back out 100, 1,000 times over. He Yanting finally moved. He took a step forward, faced the grave mound, and spoke in a deep voice, his tone carrying a kind of formulaic grief. Yang Xin, go in peace. The He family won't treat your posthumous name unfairly. Posthumous name? I almost scoffed out loud, using my death to highlight your deep love and righteousness, to pave the way for your new love. This is your so-called won't treat unfairly. The worship is over. The He family party, surrounding Lin Chushuang, descended the mountain in a vast procession. The crowd gradually dispersed. Only my desolate grave, standing there all alone, looked even more bleak. Zhongbo was by my side, tears streaming down his old face. Miss, they've gone too far. They've gone too far. I stood on the spot, motionless, until their figures completely disappeared at the end of the mountain path. I slowly emerged from behind the tree, walked up to my cenotaph, and kicked it over. What bad luck. As expected, He Yanting's deeply affectionate gesture of paying respects to his deceased wife once again earned him a chorus of praise. The Duke of Zhongguo is so loyal and devoted that Miss Ava is magnanimous too, even paying her respects to the former one. In the tea-houses and taverns, such talk was all the rage. But less than 2 days later, the tide began to turn. The few story scripts I wrote have started being told simultaneously in the biggest tea-houses in the capital by the most articulate and atmosphere-savvy storytellers Zhongbo found. The opening time was always set in the afternoon, when the tea-house was fullest with its most leisurely customers. South of the city, Rui Tea House. The storyteller's gavel slammed down. The whole hall fell silent. The storyteller with the goatee cleared his throat and began with a rhythmic cadence. Esteemed audience, today this old man will not speak of the old histories of former dynasties, nor will I discuss the chivalry of the martial world. I will only tell of one strange tale that happened right here in our capital city. A fresh and spicy one. The story goes, there was a prominent family whose young master had practiced martial arts since he was a boy, becoming exceptionally valiant. He took a wife, the daughter of a wealthy merchant, whose substantial dowry solved the family's urgent financial crisis. The tea drinker's attention was completely captured, but this young master was arrogant, looking down on his first wife for her merchant background, reeking of copper coins. Not long after their marriage, he left for the distant borderlands, leaving his new bride in the manor to serve his parents-in-law and deal with his younger sister. Her days were lived in fear and trepidation, as if walking on thin ice. Some people began to whisper to each other. This sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Then one day, terrible news came from the borderlands. The young master had been killed on the battlefield. The whole family was grief-stricken, but as fate would have it, at this very moment, his wife was found to have a pregnancy pulse. It should have been a joyous occasion, continuing the family line. But who would have known? The storyteller's voice suddenly rose to a shout. The mother-in-law snatched the doctor's diagnosis and tore it to shreds. She started screaming curses. "You've already jinxed my son to death, and now you want this bastard to get a share of the family fortune." The tea house was in an uproar. This is too ruthless. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs. What happened to the wife? The storyteller said, heartbroken and indignant. That wife suffered such humiliation, and on top of her husband's recent death, she was overcome with grief and anger. That very night her spirit followed him in death. A pity for the unborn child, who went with its mother, one corpse and two lives. Sighs and curses immediately rang out. That mother-in-law is a real piece of work, and that family is supposed to be a noble household. Tui, my dear audience, don't be hasty. The most curious part is yet to come. The storyteller gestured with his hands to quiet them, building the suspense. Before the wife's first 7 days of mourning were over, her bones not yet cold, guess what happened? He paused deliberately, scanning the entire audience. News came from the border again. The young master wasn't dead. Not only was he not dead, but he had achieved a peerless feat, been made a marquis, and returned in glory. Who? Everyone was stunned. And by this young master's side was an exquisitely charming female confidante, said to be a noble lady who had saved his life. The two of them had long been an inseparable couple at the border, deeply in love, and devoted to each other. When the household got the news, they immediately dismantled the mourning hall, put up red silks, and hung up lanterns and decorations. Oh, what a lively scene. They completely forgot about the first wife who had died for love. That mother-in-law even told the new flame personally that eyesore is finally gone. You are the true match for my son, beast worse than a pig or a dog. This is climbing up by stepping on his first wife's flesh and blood. The tea house was filled with curses. The crowd was furious. The storyteller finally slammed his gavel down hard. Everyone in this world. Can there be such a coincidence? One moment his first wife just died for love. The next moment the husband comes back to life. And he even brought a new lover, got promoted and ennobled. Is it a case of deep love but shallow fate? A trick of destiny? Or did someone with the heart of a wolf and lungs of a dog murder his wife for glory? If you want to know what happens next, then listen for the breakdown in the next chapter. He left a huge cliffhanger, bowed, and stepped down from the stage. The tea house, however, completely erupted into an uproar. Murdering his wife for glory. It must be murdering his wife for glory. That mother-in-law tore up the medical book because she was afraid the first wife would give birth to a child. Take the title of the eldest legitimate grandson, and get in her new love's way. That young master must have known too. Maybe that news of death was spread back by him himself. My God, if it is really like that, is he even human? Hey guys, you don't think this is about that newly promoted Duke of Zhongguo, do you? Shh, keep your voice down. You got a death wish. What is there to be afraid of? If he can do it, We can't even talk about it. Similar scenes were playing out at the same time in several big tea houses in the capital. The storybooks I wrote have risque plots. For example, the untold story of a husband and his female confidante on the frontier, intense conflicts. For example, between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, the official wife and the mistress. They also have suspense, and most importantly, they are way too pointed. You almost don't need to name names. Anyone with even a little knowledge of the capital's powerful families can immediately figure out who is who. Duke of Zhongguo, He Yanting, the merchant's daughter and first wife who had died for love, the Grand Tutor's granddaughter Lin Chushuang, the harsh mother-in-law Madame Zhang, all the elements, fitting together seamlessly. The rumors, as if they had grown wings, accompanied by the word of mouth of the tea-house patrons, quickly swept through the entire capital city. The previous voices that praised He Yanting's deep affection and lauded Lin and he as a match made in heaven were instantly drowned out. What replaced it was questioning, anger, and cursing. I knew that woman Chow's death was suspicious. Turns out she was driven to her death, and she was pregnant. One corpse, two lives. Isn't the He family afraid of divine retribution? He Yanting looks respectable, but I never expected him to be such a heartless man. That Lin Chushuang is no good either. She calls herself a savior, but I think she is just an adulterer. Maybe those 3 cities were what He Yanting gave to the enemy country in exchange for his own life and career. It is unknown who shouted this last sentence, but it was like a drop of water falling into a pan of hot oil, colluding with the enemy and betraying the country. This speculation was far more horrifying than him simply being a faithless man or a wife killer. At this moment, the Duke of Zhongguo's mansion was utterly overwhelmed. He Yanting returned to the mansion from court, his expression so dark that water could drip from it. He was just at the imperial court, where he was indirectly impeached by several censors, who had never been on good terms with him for failing to manage his household strictly and lacking in personal virtue. Although the new emperor didn't investigate further, that meaningful gaze made him feel like he was sitting on pins and needles. Investigate. Go investigate for this duke, just who is tired of living and spreading these rumors. He kicked over a vase in the study, thundering with rage. Lin Chushuang, holding her barely showing belly, stepped forward to soothe him in a gentle voice. Yanting, why bother with those lowlifes? It is not worth ruining your health over anger. Bother with them. Yanting violently flung her hand away, his gaze fierce. Right now, the whole capital is calling me a heartless bastard and a traitor. Even His Majesty has inquired about it. How can you tell me not to bother with them? Lin Chushuang was stunned by his yelling, and her eyes reddened with grievance. Why are you taking your anger out on me? It is not like I made them say it, Lady Zhang. Hearing the commotion, rushed over. Seeing the situation, she immediately shielded Lin Chushuang and complained to He Yanting. My son, you've scared Chushuang. She is still with child. Let those mudlegs outside wag their tongues. We have done nothing wrong, so we have nothing to fear. Done nothing wrong. He Yanting laughed out of extreme anger. Mother, if you had handled things more cleanly back then and not given people grounds for gossip, would it have come to this? He was referring to the matter of tearing up the medical book and celebrating so impatiently. Mrs. Zhang's face flushed red and then turned pale as her son retorted, and she said awkwardly, how was I supposed to know that the bitch was still restless even after she was dead? It is the living who are causing trouble. He Yanting interrupted her impatiently. Someone is playing tricks behind the scenes, and they're targeting me. Just then, He Mingzhu ran in, sobbing and weeping. Big brother, mother, the people outside, they're calling me a venomous sister-in-law. They even said I stole that dead ghost's head ornaments and gave them to Sister Chushuang. I am too ashamed to even go out. She had originally planned to go out and show off her new jewelry today, but she ended up being openly and secretly mocked by a few young ladies who usually flattered her, and was so angry she almost cried. What are you crying for? Mrs. Zhang was in a bad mood. Isn't it because of your own big mouth? You tell everyone everything? He Mingzhu was choked up and couldn't speak, and she cried even harder. Lin Chushuang watched the chaotic family scene and spoke softly. Mother, Sister Mingzhu, you should both say a little less. Yanting is angry right now. You shut up. Yanting was in the heat of his anger, and seeing her pretentious magnanimous act made him even more annoyed. If it weren't for you, none of this trouble would have happened. Lin Chushuang completely froze, her face deathly pale, looking at Yanting in disbelief. She never expected that Yanting would actually vent his anger on her. Mrs. Zhang quickly tried to smooth things over. All right, everyone. Say a little less. The most important thing right now is to figure out a way to quell the rumors. Quell it. How to quell it? Yanting sneered. Now everyone in the entire capital believes that Yanting, killed my wife and betrayed the country. Unless Chao Yangshang comes back to life and says with her own mouth that she wasn't forced to her death by me. A single sentence made the study fall silent in an instant. Chao Yangshen come back to life, possible. Yanting panted heavily, staring out the window with a sinister look in his eyes. He always felt that the person pulling the strings behind this had cunning methods and knew so much about the He family's internal affairs. Didn't seem like a typical political enemy. It was more like someone who knew him and the He family very well. An absurd thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Could it be? Chao Yangxin isn't really dead. No, impossible. He had seen the records brought by his trusted subordinate himself, confirming she was buried, confirming the coffin was thrown into the mass grave. But if it wasn't her, who else could it be? This feeling of being secretly spied on and plotted against step by step sent a chill down his spine. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the small courtyard, listening to Uncle Zhong animatedly report the battle results. Miss, your move was absolutely brilliant. Now the entire capital is cursing them. Yanting's face turned green in the imperial court today. The people we arranged brought up the topic of the 3 cities a few times in the tea houses, and sure enough, people started connecting it to treason. I gently fiddled with my teacup, my face expressionless. This is just the beginning. The first fire has already been lit. Next, it is time to add some more explosive material. Uncle Zhong, I put down my teacup. Have that rough work crone we planted in the He residence find a way to whisper in He Mingju's ear. Whisper what? Just say that Lin Chushuang is nice to her on the surface, but actually looks down on her completely, thinking she is stupid and ignorant. The things she gives her are all her own leftovers, just to placate her. He Mingzu has a firecracker temper. She'll explode at the slightest spark, especially when it involves the face she cares about most, and the admiration she has just developed for Lin Chushuang. I'd like to see just how united this seemingly harmonious new family can be internally. Also, my eyes turned cold. Have our people spread the news that the He family seized their daughter-in-law's dowry, drove her to her death, then swallowed up all her dowry assets to put into the public accounts and please the new wife. Financial problems are always one of the most effective weapons to strike at political enemies. I want everyone to see how this noble and respectable Duke Zhongguo's residence is so greedy and filthy to the core. Yes, young miss, Uncle Zhong was full of drive. The rumors grew more and more intense. A few daring scholars even wrote satirical poems and posted them on the outer walls of the He residence, covertly mocking He Yanting for killing his wife to become a general. A hypocrite, a true traitor to the nation. The people He Yanting sent out to trace the source of the rumors were always one step behind. The storytellers took the money and vanished without a trace. And the people spreading the news blended into the crowds, completely uncatchable. He felt like he had punched a wad of cotton, so frustrated he was about to explode. That night, He Yanting's confidant finally brought back some definite news. Lord Duke, we've found it. The initial printings of those storybooks all point to a small bookshop in the south of the city called Moxiangjai. Moxiangjai. A cold glint flashed in He Yanting's eyes. Have you investigated their background? Checked. The shopkeeper is an honest man from out of town with no backing. But the bookshop's backyard seems to be a whole different world, with unfamiliar faces occasionally going in and out. Get ready. He Yanting shot to his feet, grabbing his sword. Tonight, I myself will go pay them a visit. He'd just like to see what kind of god dared to poke the bear. Just past midnight, all was silent. The backyard of Ink Fragrance Bookshop was silently surrounded by dozens of guards in black. Yanting, dressed in night-prowling clothes, like an Asura of the dark night, kicked open the tightly shut room door. Inside the room, the candlelight flickered. A figure wearing a large cloak, with their back to the door, was sitting at a writing desk, apparently writing something. Hearing the sound of the door breaking, the figure paused, but did not turn around. "You are finally here." A raspy, disguised voice that made it impossible to tell if it was male or female rang out, carrying a hint of mockery. Yanting's pupils contracted. This voice was very unfamiliar, but the feeling of being watched in his heart grew stronger and stronger. "Who are you?" He gripped the hilt of his sword, approaching step by step, his killing intent awe-inspiring. "Who instructed you to spread rumors and slander this duke?" "Slander?" That figure chuckled lowly, their laugh dry and unpleasant. "Does Lord Duke mean that your wife wasn't forced to commit suicide for love? Or that you never secretly colluded with the enemy, exchanging 3 cities for this immense wealth and fortune of yours?" Yanting's heart trembled violently. 3 cities. This matter was extremely secret. Besides him and a very few trusted confidants, as well as the enemy nation's side. It was absolutely impossible for any outsider to know. "Nonsense," he roared. The tip of his sword pointed straight at the figure's back, spreading malicious lies. "This duke thinks you have a death wish." He struck out abruptly, his sword whistling sharply, aiming to flick off the person's hood. Swish, the hood was flicked off. But what was revealed was a completely unfamiliar, scar-covered profile. It wasn't anyone he had imagined at all. Yanting froze. In that split second, the scar-faced man twisted his body bizarrely, unexpectedly pulling a short blade from under the desk to parry his sword, while at the same time, a black glint shot out from his sleeve, heading straight for Yanting's face. Yanting swung his sword to block, and with a ding, a poisoned sleeve dart was knocked to the ground. And that man had already used the force to leap backward, crashing into the bookshelf behind him. Boom. The bookshelf is actually a moving mechanism. That person instantly disappeared into the darkness behind it. Treeing to run, Yanting roared, just as he was about to give chase. Bang, bang, several candlesticks in the room exploded at the same time, filling the air with a pungent white smoke. Vision was instantly obscured. "Protect his grace." The guards outside cried out in alarm and rushed in, causing a scene of chaos. By the time the smoke cleared a little, there was no trace of that Scarface to be found. The secret passage entrance behind the bookshelf had also closed, fitting seamlessly, as if it had never existed. "Search. Find him even if you have to tear this place apart." Yanting's face was ashen with rage, and he smashed the desk with a swing of his sword. The papers on the desk fluttered to the ground. He bent down to pick one up. On it was only a single line of text, the ink not yet completely dry. 3 cities exchanged for a beauty's smile. Such a grand gesture, my husband. The handwriting was elegant, yet it carried an icy mockery. Yanting stared at this line of text, as if he'd been struck by lightning. This tone, these words. This was clearly Chao Yangxin's tone. But how could that be? She was clearly dead. He had personally confirmed the report from his trusted subordinate, confirming she had been buried in the unmarked mass grave. Could it be? She isn't really dead. Once this thought surfaced, it coiled around his heart like a venomous snake. That is it. Only she would know so much about the He family's secrets. Only she would know his deepest secret. Only she would speak to him in a tone filled with such resentment and mockery. Chow Yang-xin, you are not dead. You are actually not dead. Not only are you not dead, but you've also been secretly planning all of this. A chill shot up from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Yanting's hand holding that piece of paper trembled slightly, his knuckles white from excessive force. It wasn't fear, it was anger, the fury of being fooled, and a kind of panic that things were completely out of his control. Back to the Duke's mansion. He squeezed these words out through gritted teeth, his face terrifyingly grim. After returning to the Duke's mansion, Yanting locked himself in his study and smashed everything he could. Chow Yan-xin, he chanted this name over and over, his eyes bloodshot, like a caged beast. He recalled how after the news of her death arrived, Madame Zhang and He Mingzhu had forced Chow Yang-xin. He recalled her abnormally compliant suicide to join her lover in death. He recalled that thin coffin, hastily thrown into the unmarked mass grave. Flaws, there were flaws everywhere. How could he have believed it at the time? How did he not think that she might have faked her death to escape? Yanting, what is wrong? What happened? Lin Chushuang, carrying ginseng soup, pushed the door open and entered, startled by the complete mess in the room and his horrifying expression. Get out. Yanting abruptly raised his head, glaring at her fiercely. Lin Chushuang had never seen him like this before. Her hand trembled in fear, and the ginseng soup bowl fell to the ground with a crash, shattering into pieces. The rims of her eyes turned red, and she looked as if she was about to cry. I told you to get out, don't you understand? Yanting grabbed an inkstone and threw it at her. The inkstone flew past Lin Chushuang's ear, smashed against the doorframe, and broke into several pieces. Lin Chushuang shrieked, her face as pale as a sheet, and scrambled out of the room. Madame Zhang and He Mingzhu rushed over upon hearing the noise. And when they saw the scene in the study, they too were stunned with fright. Son, what on earth happened? Madame Zhang asked, trembling. Yanting snapped his head around, his bloodshot eyes staring fixedly at them, his voice hoarse. Chow Yang-xin might not be dead. What? Madame Zhang and He Mingzhu cried out in shock at the same time, as if they had seen a ghost. Impossible, Madame Zhang shrieked. I watched her take her last breath with my own eyes. The coffin has already been buried exactly. How could she not be dead? He Mingzhu also cried out. Not dead, she must not be dead. Yanting seemed possessed, pacing amidst the wreckage. That person tonight, it was her. It must have been her. She is getting revenge on us. All the rumors, everything. It is all her doing. He violently grabbed Mrs. Zhang's shoulders and shook her forcefully. Mother, how on earth did you watch her die back then? Did you confirm it properly? Mrs. Zhang, shaken dizzy by him, also panicked. I saw her swallow the poison back then. She stopped breathing not long after. Her body even turned cold. Dead, couldn't it have been a feigned death drug? Yanting roared. You two idiots. She played you for fools. Great. Now she is hiding in the shadows, staring at us like a venomous snake. Are you satisfied now? Mrs. Zhang and He Mingzhu were scolded speechless by him, the color draining from their faces. Chow Yang-xin isn't dead. The person they thought had been eliminated long ago is actually still alive, and secretly planned all this, forcing the He family, forcing He Yanting into such a predicament. This is too terrifying. Then what do we do now? Mrs. Zhang was at a complete loss. He Yanting was panting heavily, his eyes sinister and crazed. Even if we have to turn the capital upside down, you have to find her for me. Alive. I want to see the person. Dead. I want to see the corpse. This night, the Duke of Zhongguo's mansion was brightly lit, and everyone was in a state of panic. Yanting mobilized all the informants he could, searching for my whereabouts like he'd gone mad. He looked at every servant with suspicion in his eyes. He felt that every single one of them could be my inside man. He even started having nightmares, dreaming that I crawled out of a mass grave, covered in blood, and holding a dead infant coming to claim his life. And all of this soon reached my ears through the spies we had planted. Miss, Yanting really fell for it. He is like a headless fly now, searching for you everywhere. Zhongbo reported excitedly. I sat under the lamp, unhurriedly trimming the withered leaves of a potted orchid. Let him search. The more paranoid he gets, the more he'll lose his composure. We can now proceed with the next step. Yanting's frantic search continued for a few days, but he found nothing. It was as if I had vanished into thin air without a trace. However, the rumors continued to ferment, and some censors even began to openly question the authenticity of Yanting's achievements at the border and the imperial court. Yanting was at his wit's end, his temper becoming increasingly violent, and even Lin Chushuang didn't dare to approach him lightly. Just at this moment, Lin Chushuang offered up a plan. Yanting, since she is haunting us, why don't we make her reveal herself? Lin Chushuang snuggled up next to Yanting, speaking in a soft, gentle voice, but her eyes flashed with a malicious glint. Reveal herself. How? Yanting pushed her away irritably. Lin Chushuang wasn't annoyed either. She pressed close again and lowered her voice. That Chao Yangxin, she is the most sanctimonious person. She seems fierce, but in reality, she values family above all else, especially that sickly mother of hers. Yanting's movements paused, and he narrowed his eyes. You mean, we invite Madame Chao to our residence to stay for a few days? Lin Chushuang smiled gently, but her words were like a viper flicking its tongue. Just say, out of sympathy for our mother-in-law's grief over losing her daughter. We're bringing her over to comfort and take care of her. If Chao Yangxin really isn't dead and is still watching from the shadows, could she just stand by and watch her own mother fall into our hands and suffer? A sharp glint flashed in Yanting's eyes. That is right. Chao Yangxin values that mother of hers more than her own life. In her past life, on the road to exile, she was starving to skin and bones. Yet she still saved what little food she had for her mother. Using her mother to force her to show herself is indeed the best way. Good. Yanting slammed the table. The gloom on his face for the past few days swept away, replaced by a vicious glee. Will do as you say. Send people to the Chao residence immediately. Invite Madame Chao here for me. The Chao family had long since declined, leaving only my mother with a few old servants, getting by on a meager estate. When the men from the He residence burst in like wolves and tigers, my mother was ill. They completely ignored her illness, forcibly dragged her from her sick bed, shoved her into a carriage, and brought her back to the Duke of Zhen's mansion. When the news reached the small courtyard, I was verifying several account books Uncle Zhong had just collected regarding the He family's embezzlement. Miss, this is bad. Uncle Zhong stumbled in, his old face deathly pale. They've taken the old madam. The brush in my hand fell onto the paper with a paw, spreading a large blot of ink. What did you say? I shot to my feet, my heart feeling as if it was being viciously squeezed by an invisible hand. Mother, how dare they lay a hand on my mother? This is my one uncrossable line. It was the people from the He mansion. They forcibly took the old madam from her sick. They said they were taking her to the mansion to recuperate in peace. Uncle Zhong trembled with anger. That is a weasel paying a New Year's call to a chicken. They mean no good, miss. With the old madam's frail health, how can she endure such an ordeal? My vision went black, and I had to grab the table to steady myself. Rage, like molten lava, surged and roared in my chest. Yanting, Lin Chushuang. How could you be so despicable? You couldn't get to me, so you went after my sick and weak mother. Get the carriage ready. My voice was hoarse, filled with an unprecedented killing intent. To the Duke of Zhen's mansion. Miss, you mustn't. Zhongbo turned pale with shock and blocked me. This is a trap. It is meant to force you to show yourself. If you go, you'll be walking right into it. That is my mom. I shoved him away forcefully, my eyes bloodshot. I can't let her suffer even the slightest bit because of me again. In my previous life, it was because of my affairs that my mother, overwhelmed with grief and indignation, passed away early. In this life, I came back through rebirth, and before I even had a chance to properly take care of her, I've actually let her fall into the tiger's den again. I absolutely cannot tolerate this. Young miss, please calm down. Jongbo fell to his knees, hugging my leg, tears streaming down his old face. If you go now, not only will you be unable to save the old madam, but you'll get yourself trapped too. That he Yanting is desperately trying to find you. If you fall into his hands, there'll be even less hope for the old madam. Jongbo's words were like a basin of ice water poured over my head. I froze on the spot, my monstrous rage forcefully suppressed, transforming into a deeper hatred and cold reason. That is right. I can't be impulsive. He Yanting is just waiting for me to walk right into his trap. I must stay calm. I must find another way to save Mother. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Get up, Jongbo. I helped him up, my voice still trembling, but it had already regained its composure. You are right, I can't go. Then what about the old madam? I walked to the window, looking in the direction of the Duke of Jungwo's residence, my gaze as cold as a blade. They want to play, don't they? Fine. I'll play a big one with them. The Duke of Jungwo's residence, a remote and damp woodshed. Me mother was roughly thrown onto a cold pile of straw. She was already sickly and weak, and after this ordeal, her breath was as faint as a thread, and she couldn't stop coughing. The woodshed door was pushed open. Madame Zhang and He Mingju, surrounded by a crowd of maidservants and nannies, walked in haughtily. Well, my dear-in-law, are you used to this place yet? Madame Zhang pinched her nose, disgustedly waving at the musty smell in the air. Me mother lifted her head with difficulty to look at them, her eyes holding no fear, only calm disappointment and mockery. You, what tricks are you trying to pull now, insolent? He Mingzu took a step forward, pointed at my mother's nose and cursed. You old thing, I am trying to be nice and you are being shameless. We brought you here to enjoy life, and you are putting on airs. My mother closed her eyes, no longer looking at them. This dismissive attitude completely enraged Zhangxi. She cackled, her voice ear-piercing. Live in comfort. Matron Chow, are you still dreaming? That good daughter of yours jinxed my son to death, and then had no fortune and died herself. You are now just an unwanted old family ender. She took a bowl of pitch-black, sour, stinking medicine from the hands of an old woman. In-law, your daughter can't even be peaceful as a ghost, ruining our He family's reputation everywhere. As her mother, shouldn't you atone for her sins a bit? With that, she flicked her wrist and splashed that bowl of spoiled medicine all over my mother. The sticky, cold, medicinal liquid trickled down my mother's graying hair and haggard cheeks, soaking her thin clothes. Ah, startled by the sudden humiliation and the cold, my mother cried out and began to cough violently, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Zhangxi and He Mingju looked at her sorry state and burst into triumphant laughter. Watch her for me, Zhangxi ordered the old woman guarding the door. Don't let her die. We still need her to bait that big fish. They laughed as they swaggered off. In the woodshed, only my mother's suppressed, painful coughs remained. The news spread quickly. Have you heard? The Duke of Jungwo's mansion captured that frail old madam from the Chow family. They said they were taking her in to care for her, but they ended up locking her in the woodshed and even splashing her with slop water. Oh my God, that's so inhuman. Mrs. Chow is such a kind person. The He family is getting desperate. They want to use Mrs. Chow to force Miss Chow to show up. But wasn't Miss Chow already? Who knows? Maybe she is not really dead. Public opinion was in an uproar once again. The He family's already precarious reputation completely stank up the streets. Even some originally neutral ministers expressed their dissatisfaction with He Yanting's actions. And at the same time, My people had already begun to act. That night, several agile, shadowy figures silently snuck into the area, near the woodshed in the back courtyard of the Duke of Zhengguo's manor. They used knockout incense to take down the old woman on guard and quickly picked the lock. "My lady, please forgive us," one of them whispered, wrapping a thick cloak around my extremely weak mother, heaving her onto his back, and quickly retreating under the cover of his companions. The entire process was clean and swift, without alerting anyone. Only at the woodshed's entrance, a small mark drawn with lime was left behind a simple sketch of a plum blossom. That was my mother's maiden name, Hanmei next. To it was a line of small words: "The he manor tortures and kills its in-laws. An offense against heaven and earth." The next morning, the old woman on guard woke up to find the woodshed completely empty, with only the mark and the line of words on the ground, and was so scared out of her wits that she scrambled and crawled to report it. "What, the person is gone." When He Yanting got the news, he flew into a rage and kicked over the old woman who brought the message. He rushed to the woodshed, and looking at the glaring mark and words on the ground, his face turned livid, and he trembled all over. Tricked again. Not only was the person rescued, but they even left behind such a provocative mark. Chao Yan. Shin. He almost shattered his teeth from gritting them, and what terrified him even more was that the other party could so easily rescue someone from his heavily guarded duke's mansion. This meant that the other party's power was far stronger than he had imagined. Their infiltration runs deeper. Just then, the steward came scrambling in again, his face drained of all color. "Your Grace, this is bad. The Dali Temple." "People from the Dali Temple are here," they said. They said they received an umbrella of 10,000 people and a petition, and they're summoning you to court. He Yanting's vision went black, and he almost collapsed to the ground. "Dali Temple umbrella? Chao Yangshin, you are ruthless." Meanwhile, in the rear courtyard, Lin Qushuang was stroking her still flat abdomen, trying on the set of ruby head ornaments in front of the mirror, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. A maid hurried in and whispered a few words in her ear. The smile on Lin Qushuang's face instantly froze. What? He ran away. The Dali Temple came too. She shot to her feet, a strong sense of unease flashing through her heart. Things, it seems, have completely slipped out of control. She subconsciously protected her lower abdomen. This child was her greatest protective talisman. But what if He Yanting falls? She dared not think any further. Meanwhile, I was keeping watch in another, more secluded courtyard on the outskirts of the city, watching the doctor administer acupuncture and medicine to my unconscious mother. I tightly gripped my mother's cold hand, looking at her haggard face. My heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. "Mom, I am sorry. It is your daughter who has implicated you." I leaned down and swore softly yet firmly in her ear. "Rest assured. The pain and humiliation they inflicted upon you, your daughter, will definitely make them pay it back 100-fold. Not a single one of them will escape." The public court of the Dali Temple was solemn and dignified. Outside the doors, it was packed to the brim with common folk who had rushed over upon hearing the news. Everyone craned their necks, wanting to see with their own eyes how this major case that had shaken the capital would conclude. He Yanting, dressed in the regular attire of a duke, stood below the dais with a grim expression. Behind him, Mistress Zhang and He Mingzu's faces were deathly pale, and they were trembling uncontrollably. Lin Qushuang claimed illness and did not show up, but everyone knew she couldn't escape it. The minister of the Dali Temple, Lord Zhou Zheng, sat upright on the dais, his expression grave. This case involved a newly ennobled duke. Public anger was boiling, and even His Majesty was secretly paying attention. The pressure on him was immense. Bring in the plaintiff amidst the bailiff's high-pitched call. I, dressed in plain white mourning clothes, wearing a veiled hat, slowly walked into the courtroom. In an instant, everyone's gaze focused on me. On the dais and below, there was dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. The white gauze of the veiled hat concealed my face, but it couldn't hide my straight back and cold gaze. I walked to the front of the court, faced Lord Jo Jung, and gave a graceful bow. The voice was clear, piercing through the entire courtroom, and also through the countless pricked-up ears outside. I, the commoner Chao Yangxin, hereby accuse the Duke of Zhongguo. He yanting, I paused slightly, and word by word, my voice boomed like a clap of thunder. Wife murder, colluding with the enemy, usurping the state. Boom! Inside and outside the courtroom, an uproar instantly erupted. Chao Yangxin. She is really not dead. Oh my God. She came to press charges in person. Wife murder, colluding with the enemy, usurping the state. This is a capital offense punishable by the execution of 9 generations of one's clan. He Yanting whipped his head around, staring at me fixedly, with a look in his eyes like he wanted to eat me alive. Madame Zhang and He Mingzhu looked as if they'd seen a ghost, screaming in terror and nearly collapsing to the ground order. Lord Zhou slammed his gavel, suppressing the commotion, and looked at me with a sharp gaze. Who is down there? Remove your veil. What crime do you allege? And do you have evidence? I raised my hand and slowly removed my veiled hat, revealing the face that He Yanting knew, yet now found utterly unfamiliar. Pale, gaunt, but her eyes were shockingly bright, a cold fire burning within them. I, the commoner Chao Yangxin, am He Yanting's first and lawfully wedded wife. I spoke calmly. Every crime I have alleged is true, and I have evidence for each one. The first crime, wife murder, I took a cloth bundle from my sleeve and opened it, revealing several pieces of stained, torn paper that had been carefully pieced together. This is the fragment of the medical record from the day the news of He Yanting's death arrived. When this humble woman was diagnosed with a pregnancy pulse, He Yanting's mother, Madame Zhang, snatched the medical record, tore it up on the spot, and insulted this humble woman, claiming I jinxed her son to death, that the child I am carrying is an illegitimate bastard, and that I was trying to seize the family fortune. I held the fragment high. This humble woman was filled with grief and indignation, and was forced to take a feigned death potion to escape. And the He family actually took this humble woman, who was in a state of feigned death, and hastily buried me in a mass grave. If not for a loyal servant who rescued me, this humble woman would have long turned into a pile of dry bones. This is attempted spousal murder, and the reality of forcing a daughter-in-law to her death. Lord Zhou signaled for the bailiff to present the evidence. He carefully looked at the yellowed scraps of paper, on which the blurry characters for pregnancy pulse and slippery phenomenon were faintly visible. Madame Zhang, is what Madame Chao said the truth? Lord Zhou asked in a deep voice. Madame Zhang was already scared out of her wits. Upon hearing this, she jumped up abruptly and shrieked. Nonsense! She is spouting nonsense. She died of illness because she was ill-fated. That medical record, she tore it up herself to slander me. Oh, I sneered. Since this humble woman died of illness, why didn't the He family report it to the authorities promptly, or prepare the body and hold a wake, and instead impatiently tossed a corpse into a mass grave? Does that comply with the law? Does that make any sense? I turned to the common folk watching outside. Fellow townspeople, you can all testify to how hastily the He family buried this humble woman back then. A chorus of agreement and accusations immediately rang out from outside. That is right. Back then, the He family couldn't wait to get rid of her. They didn't even have a decent coffin. It is because they have a guilty conscience. Madame Zhang was questioned until she was speechless, her face ashen. He Yanting gritted his teeth and said, Lord Zhou, this is a family matter. It was Madame Chao herself who was narrow-minded, couldn't take the provocation, faked her death to escape, and now she is turning around to falsely accuse us. Her intentions are truly malicious. A family matter. I immediately retorted. Forcing your pregnant first wife to her death, if this is a family matter, then where is the law of the land? Where is heavenly justice? I didn't give him a chance to breathe. immediately throwing out the second accusation. The second crime, misappropriating my dowry and mistreating my family. Uncle Jong timely presented several thick account books. This is the dowry list I brought when I married into the He family, as well as copies of the accounts showing how the He family has used my dowry in recent years to cover their deficits and run their businesses after using up my dowry. The He family began to despise me in every possible way. I pointed at the ashen-faced Madame Zhang and He Mingju. After my death, they even more brazenly took my belongings, like this set of ruby head ornaments gifted by the emperor. I took out the broken gemstone I had picked up earlier and gave them to He Yanting's mistress, Lin Chushuang. This is ironclad proof of them seizing their daughter-in-law's private property. Even worse, my voice suddenly rose, filled with grief and indignation, to force me to show up. They abducted my gravely ill mother from her home, locked her in the woodshed, splashed spoiled medicine on her face, and utterly humiliated her. How is such behavior any different from that of a beast? The anger of the common people outside the door was completely ignited. Beasts, they're not even human. They must be severely punished. He Yanting's face turned livid, but he forced himself to stay calm. Lord Zhou, what Lady Chow said is all one-sided. She voluntarily used her dowry to supplement the household expenses. As for the matter of Madame Chow, it was purely a misunderstanding. The servants acted on their own initiative. I was not aware of it. A fine, unaware you are, I interrupted sharply. Then what about the third crime, colluding with the enemy and betraying the country? Are you also unaware of that? Colluding with the enemy and betraying the country? The moment these 4 words were spoken, even Lord Zhou's expression changed. Lady Chow, this is a grave crime. You must not make baseless accusations. What evidence do you have? Lord Zhou's voice was stern. He Yanting's pupils constricted sharply, and he roared, Qiao Yangxin, stop your vile slander. I looked at him coldly, as if I were looking at a mere buffoon. Evidence, of course I have it. I turned around, faced the outside of the courtroom, and announced in a clear voice, Please, my lord, summon the witness, a former servant of the He residence. He Zhong. He Yanting shuddered, looking towards the doorway in disbelief. He Zhong, that old servant who was sent away to the manor under some pretext, because he stumbled upon his secret talk with a palace eunuch. Wasn't he? Supposed to be dead from illness already. How is he still alive? Under He Yanting's horrified gaze, a trembling old man dressed in coarse clothes walked into the courtroom, supported by the Yamen runners. That is the key witness we found, and have been protecting. The old servant, He Zhong, knelt on the ground, not daring to look at He Yanting's murderous gaze, and said with a trembling voice, Your Honor, I was originally a servant who swept and cleaned outside the study in the He residence. A few years ago, I accidentally overheard His Grace the Duke secretly talking in the study with a eunuch who had a high-pitched voice. He swallowed, mustering up his courage. They mentioned 3 cities, agreement, guarantee. They also said after it is done, His Grace the Duke would be guaranteed. A meteoric rise. You are talking nonsense. He Yanting raged, taking a step forward as if to strike. You old, treacherous slave. How dare you slander me, the Duke? Stop him, official Zhou shouted. The Yamen runners immediately stepped forward and restrained the frenzied He Yanting. Inside and outside the courtroom, everything erupted. 3 cities. It is really 3 cities. He really did collude with the enemy and betray the country. Traitor, He Yanting is a traitor. Official Zhou's expression was extremely grim as he stared at. He Zhong, is what you said true? Do you have any witnesses or physical evidence? He Zhong kowtowed and said, Every word this humble one says is true. At that time I was so scared my legs went weak. I knocked over the flower pot under the window and was even scolded by the steward. The estate's accounting office should have a record. That coral red glazed pot, a tribute from the western regions, was worth 100 gold pieces, and it shattered. The details all match up. Yanting's face instantly turned as pale as paper, and cold sweat trickled down. He never expected that Chao Yangshen would actually find even this old servant, whom he had almost forgotten, and even obtained such a crucial testimony. In the courtroom, Zhong's testimony was like a drop of water thrown into a wok of hot oil, scaring Yanting out of his wits. Lord Zhou's expression was no longer just grim, but carried the might of thunder. Yanting, regarding what Zhong said, "What is your explanation?" Yanting was held by the bailiffs and forced to kneel on the ground. He struggled to raise his head, his hair disheveled, his official robe askew, long having lost the imposing air of the Duke. Slander. This is blatant slander. He screamed himself hoarse, but his eyes darted around in panic. The words of an old slave who was expelled from the estate and harbors resentment. How can they be believed? This is his revenge. It was Chao Yangshin who bribed him to frame me. Revenge, I sneered, taking a step forward and glaring at him. Why would he want revenge on you? Is it because you unjustly sent him away to the manor, leaving him to fend for himself? Or is it because he stumbled upon your unspeakable secret, and you wanted to get rid of him for good? I turned to Lord Zhou and said in a loud voice, "My lord, Yanting's collusion with the enemy and betrayal of the country is not a baseless rumor. Besides witnesses, there is also physical evidence." Physical evidence? Lord Zhou perked up. Where is the physical evidence? Yanting shot his head up, staring fixedly at me. His eyes filled with disbelief and a final shred of wishful thinking. He didn't believe I could still produce any physical evidence. That matter, he had done it extremely secretively. I slowly took out a small object wrapped in a silk handkerchief from my bosom. All eyes were focused on my hand. I slowly opened the silk handkerchief. Inside lay a jade pendant half the size of a palm. The jade pendant's texture was warm and smooth. It was top-grade Suet white jade, but its shape was peculiar, carved with a totem of a strange beast that no one had ever seen, resembling a wolf but not quite a wolf, and on the back were also carved several winding, snake-like characters. This is the personal token of the Northern Dai Royal Court's left Guli King, the Wolfbite Jade Pendant. I held the jade pendant high, my voice ringing clearly throughout the courtroom. Seeing this jade pendant is like seeing the left Guli King himself. It is the proof of Yanting colluding with the Northern Dai and selling out 3 cities of our dynasty. Boom, the entire courtroom, inside and out, absolutely erupted. A token. There is really a token. The Beatty Royal Court. Oh my God, he really sold the city to the Beatty. Traitor, a damn traitor who deserves to be sliced into 1,000 pieces. The moment Yanting saw that jade pendant, it was as if all his strength was drained. His face turned ashen, and his whole body went limp. How could this be? This jade pendant, he clearly destroyed it with his own hands after it was all over. How did it end up in Chao Yangshin's hands? It is fake. It must be fake. He was like someone grasping at the last straw, roaring frantically. Fake, that is fake. Chao Yangshin forged it. She framed me. Lord Zhou took the jade pendant presented by the Yamen runner and examined it carefully, his brows furrowed. This totem and script were indeed not of the Central Plain style, but he couldn't determine its authenticity at the moment. Lady Chao, this item, where did you get it? How can you prove this is a token from the Northern Dai Royal Court? I was already prepared. Replying to you, my lord, this item was picked up beside my coffin at the mass grave when my loyal servant rescued me after I had died. My gaze swept towards the ashen-faced Yanting. I presume Duke he carelessly dropped it when he was secretly meeting with the enemy chieftain, and his confidant then accidentally brought it to the mass grave while moving. My corpse, this explanation was logical and reasonable, no matter how secretly Yanting operated. Oversights were inevitable. As for its authenticity, I paused for a moment and looked at He Zhong kneeling below. He Zhong on that day, besides hearing 3 cities and agreement. Did you also hear them mention anything about a token? He Zhong seemed to be suddenly enlightened and kowtowed forcefully. I remember now, Your Excellency. This humble one remembers now. At that time, that eunuch said in a shrill voice. Said this is the token of the left Guli king. After the matter is done, the land of the 3 cities, I didn't hear the rest clearly before I was discovered. The details matched up again. The witness's testimony and the physical evidence corroborate each other. Lord Zhou looked at the jade pendant in his hand, then at He Yanting, who was as limp as mud, and had already made a decision in his heart. He slammed the gavel down forcefully, his voice booming like a great bell. He Yanting, the witness and the evidence are all here. What else do you have to say for yourself? He Yanting was slumped on the floor, his lips trembling, but he couldn't utter a single word. It is over. It is completely over. Colluding with the enemy and betraying the country. The evidence is conclusive. This is a crime punishable by the extermination of 9 generations of the family. Lady Zhang and He Mingju were already scared stiff, frozen like wooden chickens. Lady Zhang suddenly went berserk, lunging at He Yanting to hit and scratch him. Unfilial son. You unfilial son! What have you done? What have you done? You are going to get our whole family killed. He Mingju grabbed Lin Chushuang's arm and screamed. It is all her fault. It is all this bitch's fault. If she hadn't seduced Big Brother, how could he have? Lin Chushuang was grabbed by her so painfully, she violently flung her off. Her face pale as a ghost, shielding her stomach and retorting shrilly. What nonsense are you spouting? What has it got to do with me? It was He Yanting himself who was blinded by greed. Dog bites dog, a mouthful of fur. The courtroom was in utter chaos. Lord Zhou watched this scene with disgust and slammed his gavel again. Silence. He took a deep breath and announced the sentence in a deep voice. Duke Protector He Yanting, for colluding with the enemy and betraying the country, the evidence is ironclad. A crime heaven cannot forgive. This official will now report this case for the Emperor's hearing and ask for His Majesty's sacred judgment. He Yanting and his family, take them into custody immediately. Throw them into the Heaven's dungeon to await trial. Court is dismissed. Mighty amidst the bailiff's chanting, He Yanting, Lady Zhang, He Mingju, Lin Chushuang, and the others were roughly dragged away, just like dead dogs. The moment He Yanting was dragged out of the courtroom, he suddenly turned his head, his bloodshot eyes staring deathly at me, and he roared with the last of his strength. Qiao Yangxin, you tell me, that child, is he mine or not? Even at a time like this, the thing he cared about most was still this. I looked at his desperate and unwilling eyes, like those of a trapped beast, and slowly walked up to him. I leaned down, and in a voice only the 2 of us could hear, gave him a radiant smile. That smile, ice cold, and with a kind of cruel glee, Yais. I clearly uttered that word. A final, twisted light instantly erupted in He Yanting's eyes. But the next second, my words plunged him completely into an endless hell. But at the moment I swallowed the feigned death pill, I, with my own hands, sent him away. I lightly stroked my flat abdomen, my eyes as emotionless as if looking at a dead object. The He family's bloodline. I think it is dirty. The news of He Yanting colluding with the enemy and betraying the country swept through the entire capital like a hurricane. All the voices that had sung his praises before instantly turned into a monstrous torrent of curses. Public outrage boiled over, and the calls to severely punish the traitor grew stronger, one wave after another. The new emperor was enraged. The evidence in this case was conclusive, and its impact was extremely vile. Moreover, He Yanting's great achievements had overshadowed the sovereign, which had long aroused suspicion. The verdict came down very quickly. Imperial prison, the deepest death row cell. He Yanting was wearing heavy shackles, leaning against the cold wall. His eyes were hollow like a puppet that had been torn to pieces, and then crudely pieced back together. Those words of mine, like the most vicious curse, echoed in his mind, day and night. With my own hands, I sent him away. The He family bloodline, I find it filthy. He thought Xiao Yangxin just hated him, was getting revenge on him. He never thought she would be so ruthless, to even abandon her own flesh and blood, just to get revenge on him. That child, that legitimate son who could have continued the glory of the He family, was actually forced to death by his own hands. No, he was killed by that woman, Xiao Yangxin. Immense regret and anger almost tore him apart. But it was all too late. Footsteps were heard from outside the cell door. A jailer opened the cell door, and the sharp voice of the eunuch, reading the imperial edict, rang out like a death knell. Criminal subject He Yanting, for colluding with the enemy and committing treason, the evidence is conclusive, and your crime is unforgivable by heaven and earth. It is decreed, you shall be stripped of all titles and positions. Your assets shall be seized, and you shall be executed by Lingqi. Take him to the execution ground immediately. Lingqi death by 1,000 cuts. He Yanting's body trembled violently, and the last trace of color drained from his face. He knew he would surely die, but he never expected it to be this most brutal form of execution. Number? No, he muttered, wanting to struggle, but was brutally dragged out by the wolf-like jailers. At the same time, in the women's prison, Lady Jiang and He Mingju were huddled in the filthy straw, having long since lost their former arrogance. Upon hearing the verdict, Lady Jiang's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted. He Mingju, however, let out a piercing scream. No, I don't want to die. I am the young lady of the Duke's manor. I can't die. Big brother, save me. The jailer coldly opened the cell door. He Jiangxi, He Mingju, for failing to report a known crime and for harboring a traitor. It is decreed, immediate beheading. Drag them out. No, He Mingju, with her hair disheveled, struggled like a madwoman. I was framed. It was all Xiao Yangxin, that whore, who set me up. It was all Lin Chushuang, that vixen, who set me up. No one listened to her wailing. She and the fainted Jiangxi were dragged off in another direction. Another, slightly cleaner prison cell. Lin Chushuang desperately protected her belly, her face as pale as paper. She heard the verdicts for He Yanting, Mrs. Zhang, and He Mingju, and was so scared she trembled all over. The eunuch announcing the decree walked to the front of her cell door. Criminal woman Ava Corporation, as an accomplice to a rebel, you should have been executed for the same crime. In consideration of your pregnancy, His Majesty has shown mercy. It is decreed that you are to be stripped of all titles and exiled 3,000 li, never to be pardoned. Even in the event of a general amnesty, depart at once. Exile Lin Chushuang's legs went soft, and she collapsed to the ground. Although her life was spared, being exiled 3,000 li, how could a weak and delicate woman like her, pregnant with a child, possibly survive? No, she can't be exiled. She suddenly lunged at the cell door, grabbed the bars, and screamed at the eunuch. Gong Gong, I have important information to report to His Majesty. It is about He Yanting's other criminal evidence. I beg you, Gong Gong, to pass on the message. I beg His Majesty for mercy. The eunuch disgustedly shook off her hand and sneered. Miss Ava. Oh no, the criminal woman from Ava Corporation. Save it. He Yanting has already confessed and signed his confession. As for that intelligence of yours, you can save it for King Yama. No, I really know. I also know that he and take her away. The eunuch waved his hand impatiently. Two sturdy old women came forward, and without a shred of pity, dragged the crying and struggling Lin Chushuang out. Execution ground, a sea of people. Almost all the common folk in the city had flocked over, carrying rotten vegetable leaves, smelly eggs, and even stones. Traitor, death by 1,000 cuts. Kill He Yanting, avenge the spirits of the soldiers at the border. Dog traitor, give us back our 3 cities. He Yanting was tied to the execution post, while the executioner stood to the side, holding a small knife that glinted coldly. He lifted his head and looked at the common folk below, who had once fanatically worshipped him but now wished they could eat his flesh raw. Looking at the officials on the high platform overseeing the execution, looking at this gray, hazy sky, a dead silence filled his heart. In this life he had schemed and strived, plotted everything, even to the point of selling out his country's land and betraying his home and nation. In the end, this was the fate he met. His reputation in ruins, sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts. In the end, what was it all for? The execution official gave the order. Execute. The executioner's hand rose and the knife fell. The first piece of flesh was sliced off. He Yanting let out a piercing scream that didn't sound human. The intense pain sobered him up instantly. It also made him see, across from the execution ground, the window of an elegant private room in a tall tea house. Chao Yang-shin was standing there quietly, dressed in plain clothes, with a calm expression. Across the surging crowd, across the pervasive stench of blood, our gazes met in mid-air. No hatred, no resentment, only icy indifference, as if watching a farce that had nothing to do with me. He Yanting's screams came to an abrupt stop. He stared fixedly at me, his gaze extremely complex. Regret, hatred, resentment, malice, perhaps all of them. But in the end, it all turned into endless despair and a void of nothingness. He understood. From beginning to end, he had underestimated this woman. He thought she was a daughter flower that could be plucked at will. But little did he know. She was a highly poisonous datura flower, beautiful and deadly. The executioner's blade fell, one strike after another. Fresh blood stained the execution platform red. He Yanting's consciousness gradually faded. The moment before he completely lost consciousness, he used his last bit of strength to hoarsely shout his final words in my direction. Chao Yang-shin, do you think the new emperor will let you go? You know too much. The voice was faint, yet it carried a trace of a vicious curse. Then, his head finally drooped down powerlessly, his breath cut off. I stood by the window, watching all of this expressionlessly, watching this man who was once my husband in name, this enemy who had caused my death, suffer immense pain, and finally turn into a bloody and mangled corpse. He Yanting was executed by death by 1,000 cuts. Lady Jiang and He Mingju were beheaded on the same day. The He family's assets were confiscated. The vast estate of the Duke of Zhongguo was sealed up overnight, and the once bustling sight of its gates seemed a world away. Their family fortune was confiscated, their servants all scattered. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Those friends and relatives who once fawned over the He family now couldn't avoid them fast enough. Some even proactively submitted evidence of the He family's past crimes to draw a clear line. The once illustrious He family had completely vanished into thin air. And the architect of all this, Chao Yang-shin, felt little to no pleasure. With my great revenge accomplished, my heart felt empty instead. Like a string stretched too taut that suddenly slackened, I felt a bit lost. I still lived in that inconspicuous little courtyard on the outskirts of the city. Every day, I took care of my mother, whose health was gradually improving, and managed the few shops that Uncle Zhong had been running behind the scenes, which had now quietly grown. The days were so peaceful it was as if the previous storm of blood and gore had only been a nightmare. But I knew that beneath the calm, an undercurrent was surging. Yanting's curse before he died wasn't groundless. I knew too much. The details of Yanting's collusion with the enemy, his secret connections with certain people in the palace, and even the new emperor's unspeakable helping hand in bringing Yanting down. Any one of these things was enough to get me killed without a proper burial. That day someone came from the palace. It wasn't a ferocious-looking guard, but a fair-faced, beardless, middle-aged eunuch with a warm smile. Miss Chao, His Majesty requests your presence. He spoke politely, but his eyes carried a pressure that couldn't be refused. What was bound to happen has finally come. I gave the worried Uncle Jong and my mother a reassuring look and calmly boarded the palace carriage. The imperial study, the scent of ambergris incense curled and lingered. The new emperor, that young monarch I had once glimpsed from afar at the execution grounds in my past life, was now sitting behind the imperial desk, reviewing memorials. He wasn't wearing the dragon robe, just casual clothes, but it still couldn't hide his imperial majesty. I knelt and saluted. This humble woman, Chao Yangxin, kowtows to your majesty. He didn't immediately tell me to rise. The imperial study was silent, with only the faint sound of him turning the pages of the memorials. An invisible pressure began to fill the air. I knew this was a power play. After an unknown amount of time, he slowly put down his vermilion brush and raised his eyes to look at me. His gaze was sharp, like a hawk's filled with scrutiny and inquiry. Chao Yangxin. He slowly began to speak, his voice calm, yet it carried an undeniable power. You have performed a great service for the court by rooting out a national pest like He Yanting. Speak. What reward do you desire? I lowered myself, my voice respectful. This humble woman dares not ask for a reward. He Yanting got what he deserved. What this humble woman did was merely to seek justice for myself. I dare not take credit. Oh, the new emperor chuckled lightly, his meaning unclear, merely seeking justice. You planned every step. Your calculations were flawless, forcing He Yanting and even the entire He family into a desperate situation. This kind of mind, these kinds of methods, don't seem like they're just for seeking justice. He stood up and paced over to me, his bright yellow boots stopping within my downcast line of sight. Chao Yangxin, you are a smart person. Jen does not like to beat around the bush either. He looked down at me from his superior position, his tone carrying a sense of calm that came from having everything under control. You have two paths. First, he held up one finger. You know too many secrets. With you outside the palace, Jen is not at ease. Enter the palace. Jen will grant you the rank of a consort, guarantee you a lifetime of glory and wealth, and also save Jen from worrying day and night. Enter the palace as a consort. It sounds nice, but it is just surveillance and control in disguise. To confine me within these 4 palace walls, to become his caged canary, my life and death all depending on his whim. If I agree, there will be no freedom to speak of for the rest of my life. Second, he held up a second finger. In consideration of your meritorious service, we grant you 1,000 taels of gold and 100 mu of fertile land. You are to take your mother, leave the capital far behind, never to return, and never to mention the old matters again. This seemed like a path to survival. Take the reward and go far away. But those 5 words, never mention the old matters, weighed as heavy as a mountain. This meant I had to remain silent with all the secrets, and if I ever disobeyed, a devastating catastrophe would be waiting for me. Besides, would the new emperor really be at ease letting a living piece of evidence like me leave? I am afraid that not long after I left the capital, I would accidentally run into bandits and highwaymen and be left without a trace. 2 paths seemingly a choice, but in reality both were dead ends. I knelt on the ground, a cold sweat seeping slightly from my palms. The new emperor was waiting for my answer. In the imperial study, the air seemed to have frozen. I knew that my answer would decide my ultimate fate. Taking a deep breath, I raised my head and met the new emperor's bottomless gaze. Your Majesty, my voice was calm, yet it held an unshakable resolve. This humble subject chooses the 3rd path. The new emperor raised an eyebrow, clearly a bit surprised. Oh, a 3rd path, yes, I said clearly. This humble subject is willing to hand over to the national treasury all the dowry assets I can recover. Aside from what was confiscated from the He family, a total of 300,000 taels of silver, and several land deeds for manors and shops, to be used as military funds. to compensate for the losses caused by He Yanting's treason. A flicker of surprise flashed through the new emperor's eyes. 300,000 taels. That is not a small amount. It is almost 80% of my dowry. This commoner asks for nothing else, I continued. My tone sincere, I only beg your majesty to grant this commoner an imperial edict, allowing this commoner to retain her merchant status, to conduct business throughout the land as a mere commoner. This commoner promises your majesty that in this life I will never enter the capital, and will never again mention a single word related to the He family or past events. I kowtowed heavily. I beg your majesty, grant my wish. This is my third path, handing over most of my assets, to show that I am no threat, only asking for my freedom in return. A life of freedom far from the center of power where I can make a living with my own abilities. The new emperor fell silent. He looked at me, his eyes flickering, as if he was weighing the options. The terms I proposed were indeed generous. Handing over this huge fortune solved a part of the state treasury's most pressing needs, and my active request to keep my merchant status and trade across the land further showed that I had no interest in power, only in wealth, plus the promises to never enter the capital, and never bring up the pasts for a meritorious subject who is no longer a threat and can still create value. It seems there is no need to wipe them out completely. After a long while, the new emperor slowly spoke, his voice betraying no joy or anger. Chao Yangxin, you really are very clever. He returned to the imperial desk and picked up the vermilion brush. Granted. Thank you for your majesty's immense grace. I kowtowed again. The huge stone in my heart finally dropped. When I left the imperial study, my back was already soaked with cold sweat, bargaining with a tiger. It is just like this. But no matter what, I won the bet. I got what I wanted most in exchange: freedom. Walking out of the palace gates, the sunlight was blinding. I squinted and took a deep breath of the free air outside the palace. Uncle Zhang and the carriage were waiting. Not far away, his face filled with anxiety and worry. I gave him a reassuring smile and walked over. Miss, are you all right? Uncle Zhang asked hurriedly. I am all right now. I shook my head. It is all over. We got on the carriage, the wheels rolled, and we drove away from this imperial city that had devoured countless ambitions and lives. A few days later, after I finished handling all the property transfers, I prepared to leave the capital. Regarding the fates of Lin Chushuang and He Mingzhu, Uncle Zhang also came back with news. Miss Lin Chushuang, on the road to exile, was jointly dealt with by several officials' wives who had been bullied by her before. The child wasn't saved, and she went mad. In the end, she accidentally fell into a river, and even her body wasn't found. I closed my eyes. What goes around comes around. Retribution is a bitch. What about He Mingzhu? She was sold into servitude by the government. Because of her shrewish temperament, she was resoled by her masters several times. In the end, she ended up in the lowest class brothel. After just a few days, she caught a dirty disease, couldn't bear the humiliation, and drowned herself by jumping into a well. Madame Zhang, He Mingzhu, Lin Chushuang, these people who once trampled on and humiliated me at will, all got the ending they deserved. I feel not a shred of sympathy. The pain they inflicted on me and my mother was 100 times more brutal than this. They brought all of this on themselves. The day we left the capital, the weather was great. My mother and I sat in an inconspicuous blue cloth carriage, with Zhongbo driving. Besides the necessary travel money and a few personal belongings, we brought almost nothing with us. Everything from the past glory, humiliation, hatred, we left it all completely behind us. The carriage slowly drove out of the city gate, heading towards a distant place, unknown yet full of hope. My mother held my hand, a relaxed smile on her face that I hadn't seen in a long time. Yangxin, from now on, it is just the two of us. I squeezed her hand back and smiled too. Mom, from now on, we're going to have a good life. A very, very good one.